Hi and welcome back to Canada Top to Bottom. Now, if you subscribe to our channel or have been following Canadian immigration over the last few years, you'll probably be aware that immigration to Canada has been a bit of a mess. Pre-COVID, it was relatively simple to move to Canada. You created an express entry profile and provided you had a decent education, prior work experience and relatively good language proficiency and were under 40, the chances are you were going to get selected in the draw and invited to apply for permanent residence. Well, not anymore.
As an example, in April and May of 2017, there were 2 Express Entry All Programme draws where the cut-off score was 415 CRS points, and 2 more with cut-off scores of 423. Even as recently as 2019, you were still getting drawn if you had points in the 430s. In stark contrast, the latest draws in 2022 have seen cut-off scores of over 500, only dropping to 496 and 494 in the last month. Right now, there are more than 80,000 people in the Express Entry pool who have a CRS score between 430 and 490, which just shows what an enormous impact the COVID pandemic had on immigration.
So, although the Express Entry system itself hasn't changed, the makeup of the pool of candidates has. More than 18 months of no draws at all, coupled with thousands of people continuing to create profiles and join the pool, understandably created an overwhelming backlog and has pushed the number of people with a high points total up and up. With this comes the harsh reality that moving to Canada isn't as easy as it used to be. You may still have a good education, excellent language skills and great professional experience, but whereas 3 years ago you would have been selected in the very next draw, you may well not have the option of being selected at all now. So, with the new year approaching, if you still want to move to Canada, what are your options in 2023?
You can of course still create an Express Entry profile, which is free to do, and hope that the score will come down. But you should be realistic and understand that unless you have a score above 480, you're probably not in with a chance in the near future. If you were to secure a job offer in Canada, this would make a huge difference. But again, you should consider the reality of this, that finding an employer willing to hire you in Canada before you are even legally allowed to enter the country is no mean feat. You're certainly in with a better shot if you are highly skilled or have experience in a specialist field, but the average person, such as us, honestly, would not have found it easy to secure a job offer in Canada before we arrived.
For those of you from visa-exempt countries, meaning that you don't need to go through the long, expensive and often arduous process of obtaining a visa, a great option is coming to Canada initially as a visitor, using the Electronic Travel Authorization or ETA. Once here, you are permitted to stay for 6 months as a visitor, and in this time, provided your finances allow it, you can network with employers and look for jobs on the ground. This is so much easier than trying to find employment whilst in another country. We arrived in Canada as visitors initially, as we were so fed up of waiting for our permanent residency to arrive. There's nothing like getting in front of a potential employer and introducing yourself in person. 6 months here gives you a wonderful head start and really makes life easier to find work and start the immigration process from there.
Another option we always recommend is learning some French. If you have no knowledge of French at all, this may not sound like a viable option to you, but outside of getting a provincial nomination or a job offer, learning some French is by far the best way of adding a significant number of CRS points to your total. So it might be worth considering that dedicating a few months of your life and a bit of money could make a huge difference in the long run.
So, as you can see, the dynamics of Canadian immigration has changed dramatically and is continuing to change. People who want to move to Canada post-pandemic are having to get more and more creative with their options. And this leads us on to our main topic for today, that so many foreign workers are now looking towards a study permit as their way into the country.
For a lot of people, especially those who already have post-secondary education, such as bachelor's degrees, master's degrees or postgraduate diplomas, the prospect of going back to studying is not something on their radar. Plus, the fact that coming to Canada as an international student is extremely expensive. But quite honestly, coming on a study permit is fast becoming the only viable option for a lot of foreign nationals who are desperate to move to Canada.
Here's the lowdown on what's involved with getting a Canadian study permit. The first thing you need to do is investigate potential courses and universities. Once you have settled on a course and a school, you send an application, and provided that you meet all their requirements, they will send you an admission offer letter. With this letter, you can apply for a Canadian study permit.
Now this is where the hard work begins, because this is not as simple as it sounds. You need to put together an incredibly compelling application, convincing the visa officer who reads your submission that you really do want to study in Canada in order to advance your career or better yourself, that you have the money to pay for it, and that you have every intention of leaving Canada at the end of your permitted stay, and you do not plan to illegally overstay your welcome. For more information on what's involved in getting a Canadian study permit, check out our video, which is linked above.
So let's say you have gotten through this process and been granted a study permit. Once you have graduated, you will be eligible to apply for a postgraduate work permit. This is an open work permit, meaning you can work for any employer in any field of employment, and the length of the work permit will depend on the length of your study program. If you studied for less than 2 years, your work permit will be for the same length of time as your program. But if your course was for 2 years or more, your postgraduate work permit will be for 3 years.
And here's the crucial part. This work permit will allow you to gain Canadian work experience, which is the absolute gold dust you need to then apply for permanent residence. Canadian work experience not only gives you extra CRS points for an express entry profile, but it also allows you to apply for permanent residence under the Canadian Experience Class Programme. Amongst other criteria, you need to have at least 12 months of skilled work experience in Canada to be eligible to apply.
So the long and short of it is that yes, a study program will cost a lot of money and is not an immediate way into permanent residence, but it is currently a much quicker way of entering Canada than any of the immigration programs. The processing time for express entry is 27 months right now, with no signs of the backlog diminishing anytime soon.
In addition, if you come with a spouse, they can apply for an open work permit whilst you study, and you yourself can also work during your study program, provided you have time, of course. If you are bringing your children with you, they can also attend school for free. And the best part is that after graduation, you are well on the road to permanent residence. With your postgraduate work permit, you can stay on after you graduate, gain valuable work experience, and apply for PR without having to leave the country.
So there you have it. You can probably see why this is becoming more and more popular as a route to Canadian permanent residence. Not your conventional immigration route, but a definite option. Let us know if this is a consideration for you, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.